to the Upshot, multi-world disc golf's podcast about the latest in the disc golf world. I'm the editor, Charlie Eisenhood. Joining me is Josh Mansfield as we get set to talk about the Beaver State Fling, happening for the first time since 2019 over the weekend. A rainy weekend in the Pacific Northwest, and a nice change of pace. You know, I was thinking, Josh, while we were watching the tournament this weekend, we've been having like lots of different weather this year on tour. We've had the windy tournaments, we've had the hot tournaments, we've had the rainy tournament. So like, what's next? I'm not sure, but it's nice to see pros have to deal with the conditions to an extent. I don't really need the DDO wind again. I don't. But other than that, I think it's been kind of a nice change of pace.
Well, look, we're going to Colorado, and it's, possibility of snow 24/7 all year round in Colorado. So, you might get to see the match play championships in a couple inches of snow. I doubt it. I haven't checked the weather report. And while I wouldn't put money on that, it's always a possibility.
Well, looking forward to the Match Play Championships. We'll talk about it on our Thursday show. Today, let's talk about Beaver State Fling. So, Garrett Gurthie comes on the Upshot interview series last week, and he says, I'm about to go out and win this thing. This is my favorite pair of courses in the world. I love Beaver State Fling. I've been waiting to come back here, and just watch, I'm about to go win. Well, he backed it up. And really just a pure continuation of the really strong play we saw from him at Portland Open. Actually ended up averaging slightly higher rated disc golf this past weekend, over 1050 for the win. And it's just convincing. He was so dialed in. The putter was going. He was throwing some amazing rollers. He had one in the final round yesterday that was just spectacular. Look, it's great to see Double G playing at this level because, when he's as credible a threat as anybody in the sport to win a tournament.
Well, and just look at the way that he did it. No bogeys. He did not have a single bogey all weekend long. He has no OB strokes. He hit the fairway 83% of the time. The next best was Evan Scott down in fourth at 77%. He beat him by 6% there. Circle one in regulation. Double G is at the top. No, Double G is not at the top. He's at 41%, though, still in the top five. But again, putting at 87 and 33%. That's if Double G putts like that, he is a contender on any given week.
100%.
Any given week.
100%. And when Double G is gaining strokes above the average, when his strokes gained is in the positive chart, the positive category, he is going to be a threat to win. Yep. We often talk about some of these players who are so spectacular off the tee, just needing to be league average. And I think that's true for Double G. If he's plus, I don't know where he ended up specifically. I think he was probably in the top 25 in terms of putting overall. But when you look at the stats, how much more do you really want to see from him? 87 and 33 right. is one of the better lines of the weekend. Yes, there were players who shot 100% inside the circle this weekend, or, a couple people who had 62% circle two putting. Those people are going to get more of a bonus from their putting. But when you combine that with the just spectacular ability off the tee, he's top 4 in strokes gained from tee to green. That's going to put you in a position to win. And the zero OB strokes is really the thing that maybe created the separation. Everybody else who was top in the tee to green category had OB strokes. Everybody else in the top 10 had OB strokes. Not Double G. He came very close to going out of bounds in a crucial hole late. I think it was a genius hole? I think it was. Pushed it way right, but still was in position to attack for birdie and carded the birdie.
Well, and if you go and take a little deeper dive at his putting statistics, he was 13 of 15 on the weekend, which is a pretty low number. He really wasn't having to putt that often. And that's what he has to do in order to win. He has to be able to minimize the amount of putting that he has to do, knowing that it's one of his weaknesses. But one thing I just want to highlight that I find remarkable is that his circle one putting was at about 87%, which not a bad number by any means. I mean, I think it's a pretty good number. That's only good for 38th on the weekend.
Yeah, I mean, I think at any given weekend, especially on a course there's going to be a lot of holes where you're putting from long range. Mm-hmm. There's not necessarily going to be that many tester C1 putts, in that 25 to 35 foot range. Like, you're either tapping in or you're throwing from circle 2 a lot. And we saw that this weekend. I think that means when there's not a lot of C1 tester putts, you're going to have people who hit all of their putts. So 13 to 15, 15 to 15, then that's the difference between 87% and 100%. I mean, it's two putts.
Right. Well, but I mean, it's enough. 13 made putts is still significant over the course of a weekend. And, if you're only putting 4 Circle 1X putts per round, 5 Circle 1X putts per round, and you're making 4 of them, then you're in pretty good shape. So, and that's what we saw from Double G this weekend.
Yeah, and I know you just said his putting is a weakness. I mean, I would agree in the overall sense, but it's not right now.
No, it's not right now. No.
I mean, he was all over the basket with circle 2 putts, and, it was a confident performance. He came into the final round up by a stroke on Corey Ellis. We're going to talk about that stroke that Corey Ellis was missing a little bit later in the show. And, Joel Freeman makes this incredible push. And Garrett Gurthie never got rattled, never looked nervous, only mis-executed badly on like 2 shots all around. And, I mean, ultimately it was a convincing win.
And what's really impressive to me is on that back stretch, in the holes 12 to 18, Double G goes just par all the way through. And he knows that he can. I mean, Joel Freeman, and we'll talk more about this in a minute, but Joel Freeman's incredible push is capped with a birdie on 12, ace on 13. So all of a sudden he's got 3 strokes, and Double G just continues to just kind of chug along and never in question. And I think it was that kind of confidence that really, made sure that he didn't try too hard to do anything, and that allowed him just to stay where he was at. And that was all that he really needed to do, even though the lead wasn't so significant that, I mean, it wasn't ever out of the question, in my opinion, until pretty late, that no one was going to catch Double G. 3 strokes, he's got time. But Double G's confidence and patience in this game, I think, was just exceptional, and shows that Double G is a very well-rounded player when his putter is going really well for him, which it has been for the past 2 weeks.
He couldn't have played it better. I mean, he definitely laid up on multiple holes down the stretch where he could have attacked for birdie and chose not to because he had a lead, and why push it? And so, don't be fooled by that. I mean, the fact is he still shot a 7 under despite that, right? So he gets the 3-pack on 9, 10, and 11 of the birdies, and then he kind of puts it in cruise control at that point. And, he had some opportunities where he could have run a putt, or he could have pushed harder on his tee shot, and he just didn't have to, so he didn't. Joel Freeman really did make quite the push. Ends up shooting an 11 under, and that was with a bogey, which immediately followed one of the better aces we've seen this year. Take a look if you're watching on YouTube. If you're not watching on YouTube, you can check us out, Ultra Disc Golf on YouTube. Please like and subscribe. Look at this. Look at this ace from Joel Freeman. Are you kidding me? Just on a line, skips it in. I mean, he might have gone OB if it didn't hit chains. But I mean, that's how an ace works, right? Most of the time, it's a slightly mis-executed shot, but spectacular from Freeman. And so, of course, that's good for an eagle. And so he picks up the 2 strokes and ties it up with Garrett Gurthie at that point. But then I think he got a little too pumped up from that. You get the big rush of adrenaline, and he then started to mis-execute a little bit on the next couple holes, takes a bogey immediately following the ace, and then gets a par on the following hole, which is one you really should birdie. And so he ends up kind of dropping 2 strokes back to double G, and that was kind of it. He ran out of steam at the exact wrong time.
I would be really curious to see if you were to go back and pull tournament aces to see how the next 3 or 5 holes go. And see if it like detrimentally affects your performance after hitting an ace. Because I mean, you're right. I mean, you've got to have so much adrenaline pumping through you that trying to calm down for that next tee shot in the next couple holes has to be incredibly difficult, especially if there's gallery.
Here's the crazy thing about this ace. So often when we see an ace, it's like some random guy on hole 17 who's in 40th place at USDGC. Oh, ace! Wow! Oh. I mean, look, trust me, I love an ace regardless of the situation as much as anybody. But this is crazy because he not only was charging, but it was to tie it up. How often do we see that on tour? Yeah. Where you have somebody who's like legitimately in contention, and in this fashion to tie it up at the top is major wow. It was an awesome moment, and you kind of wish he was able to keep it going, because I would have loved to seen how it would have played out with him, not on the same card as Gurthie, and kind of like this battle happening 2 holes ahead.
Yeah. But I mean, we've got to talk about Joel Freeman's just stellar performance on the weekend, keeping himself in position and then shooting an 11 under. That was tied for the hot round with Cole Redolin for that final round. Joel Freeman is someone who is regularly finishing, and consistently in the top 10, and is someone that, week in and week out is someone who has to be looked at. I think that the mental game and kind of blow up holes and not being able to settle nerves or, whatever have you is kind of one of the bigger things holding him back. But Joel Freeman is playing very well, and we've talked about him earlier this season, and we're continuing to talk about him, and I have a feeling that we're going to talk about him for the rest of the season, because he's demonstrating an ability to play on a variety of courses. And I think that's what's just been so exceptional, is that Joel Freeman has been in discussion through just a variety of courses. And, one of the big things that he's been working on that we've been talking about is, and he talked about as well in our interview, was his putting and his Circle 1X putting. Well, this weekend, 30 of 33 from Circle 1X, 90%, almost 91%. And that's a great putting performance. And if Joel, like Garrett Gurthie, keeps that up, he's just got an incredibly well-rounded game, forehand, backhand, if his putter goes well. And Joel Freeman's going to be someone that we're going to keep talking about this year.
Yeah, I mean, he was at 79% C1X putting last season. Not a very good number. Now he's at 84. No. A 5% improvement is substantial.
Yes.
It's substantial. And, you're seeing more weekends like this where he putts well, even above that. I mean, here's the question, Josh. Is Joel Freeman a credible world championship contender? Do you think he could win?
I think if you were to pull up a betting odds page for the World Championship, Joel Freeman would be one of the guys that they would list near the end of that, list of here's the guys and their odds to win it.
Value play to bet on him.
Yes.
You might get like 20 to 1, 25 to 1.
Mm-hmm.
I would bet him at that number.
Yeah, but it's significant enough that they'd publish those odds. They'd be showing it. It's not like you're pulling I don't know, someone's Luke Humphreys odds right now, because Luke Humphreys is right. Luke Humphreys, you probably could make a bet on him. You're gonna have to go pretty far down in order to find his odds. They're gonna be putting Joel Freeman's in as here's your value bet. Put some money on Joel Freeman.
Here's the thing about Joel Freeman, all right, and you saw it in a microcosm this weekend, and we've seen it at multiple points this year. It's all between the ears.
Mm-hmm.
The guy has all the tools as an elite disc golfer. I mean, he's got power. He's extremely accurate. The putting is now to the point where maybe it's not a strength, but it's no longer a weakness.
Right.
And so the problem is when he's in a situation where he's like in the lead, we have seen him wilt. We saw it at USDGC. We saw it earlier this year. I can't remember what tournament it was, but he was playing great and then just melted and like threw a tantrum or like had some bizarre rules like application. Like the guy has the tools, but he has to figure out how to better emotionally regulate if he wants to become the kind of killer player that we see these top guys be. You know, people talk about Calvin Heimberg robotic, Chris Dickerson robotic. Paul Macbeth has that feature. Ricky is maybe a little bit more emotive, but the dude is laser focused when it's the final round and he's in the hunt. Joel Freeman, it's a little roller coastery, and while that can sometimes play to his advantage, it can also hurt him. And I think it hurts him more than it helps him. And so that's what I want to see from Joel Freeman is like, can you prove that you can stay at a little bit more of an even keel, which I think is going to be what's going to be required for him to take the step to be able to actually go out and win an event on tour. And you see with the ace, you know, you can't blame the guy for coming out and making a couple of bad shots after an ace, but that should be a signal to him that like, yo, I need to work on my ability to maintain more even keel focus as I go through a round, because you can't get too pissed off when something doesn't go your way, which we obviously see that from Joel Freeman on a regular basis. And you can't get too high when things are going well.
Mm-hmm. You know, it reminds me a lot of Eagle, you know, in previous seasons, and kind of that very, as you said, emotive and emotions allowing him, you know, kind of running his round. And the problem is that, well, as good of a golfer as Joel Freeman is, he doesn't have the raw talent that Eagle does.
No.
Nobody does. I think can be argued that Eagle's just one of the most gifted disc golf players, just in natural talent.
Ever to play the game. And so Eagle has those, you know, emotions and can derail his rounds, which we talk about too. But he oftentimes can overcome that thanks to just his incredible level of skill. Joel Freeman does not have that, which means in order to be a well-rounded disc golfer who wants to be successful on tour, the well-roundedness has to apply to the mental game as well. I'm curious, I don't know who's on his bag, if anybody. I would be curious to know what would happen if he could find somebody, you know, like a Zach Melton, who could help him relax a little bit and could kind of keep him focused on what's important during a round. I think it might be his wife that's on his bag, actually. But
she travels with him.
Yeah, I don't know if it was his wife, but there was a woman who was caddying for him this weekend.
Okay.
So I also want to talk about Corey Ellis. You know, the thing that was really interesting about Ellis this weekend is that, you know, when it was time for him to try to step up and make a big shot, he did not shy away from that moment, even though he didn't end up executing on those shots. He had an opportunity to hit a big putt in the back nine. It must have been hole 11, the island hole. It was either 11 or 13. I think they're both island holes. No, the 13. I think they are. Yeah, because the 13 is the one that Freeman aced, skipped off the road. And he has, you know, he's like a circle two putt, death putt, danger behind. And he doesn't just kind of loft it up there and hope to the half bid drop it in. I mean, he really throws it at the chains, misses, goes OB, and ends up, you know, not being able to take that stroke on double G. And you got to give the guy respect for giving it a chance. And there were moments later in the round as well where he, you know, tried to just rip on a shot where he really needed to pick up the stroke. And, you know, he ends up dropping down into third place. If he'd played more conservatively, he probably could have taken second, but he went for the win. And the thing about Corey Ellis, and I talked about this on the broadcast on Disc Golf Network, you know, this guy's gone from 1008 rated to 1028 rated in 18 months. I mean, he is on a extreme upward trajectory, and I think people need to start paying attention to Corey Ellis. He was fourth at Champions Cup. Who was talking about him? And it's not like we sit and talk about him. Maybe we mentioned his name in passing, Josh, like, oh, Corey Ellis finishing fourth. We're not giving him airtime on the podcast. Well, I think it's maybe going to change soon because he has worked on he's worked on his control. That's the biggest thing. Best putter on tour, elite power. What more do you need to see? I think it's really just a matter of him continuing to refine his game and be able to overcome the disc falling out of the bottom of the basket. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. What do you think of Corey Ellis this weekend?
I agree. I think that's a really good analysis. And I went back and looked at his results. The 4th place at Champions Cup. After that, 6th place at Open at Belton, a very strong Silver Series. Now he's got the 3rd place at Beaver State Fling. Those are his 3 top 10 finishes on tour thus far. His next best finish is at OTB, where he was 11th, a couple 15ths, and then a couple of really poor performances. 62nd LVC, 70th at Waco, 82nd DDO. But as you mentioned, if control is his biggest nemesis, it's the 3 windiest tournaments of the year that he is finishing outside top 50, right? That makes sense. It makes a lot of sense. I think that Corey Ellis is demonstrating for us the value of the Silver Series right now. Give him a little bit lighter field and let him kind of, demonstrate his upward trajectory, and he's able to show some really impressive things. He's able to show and get some airtime, whereas in other tournaments he may not. I don't know how much airtime he got at Champions Cup. I don't remember that far back. But, getting to see him, see his game, watching that development, that is the value of a Silver Series here. It's what gets people like Corey Ellis on the radar. Yep. And then, as you mentioned, he's best putter on tour. It's just a question of whether or not and how fast he's able to get that control, get the drives dialed. Because if you pull his season stats, 84% Circle 1X, 38% Circle 2, which is good for 2nd place. But then for fairway hits, he's 67%, which is good for 113th.
Yeah, there you go.
Just park to 91st. Circle 1 regulation, 83rd. Circle 2 in regulation, 80th. Like, that makes sense.
His Circle 1 and Circle 2 in regulation are above, rank-wise, are above his fairway hits, which shows you that he's got the ability to, scramble from out of position. But obviously, the thing that he's going to need to work on is being able to carve those fairways. But I think we saw it from him this weekend. Mm-hmm. And you have to be able to hit fairways if you want to do well at WR Jackson, where he did play very well at Champions Cup.
You ready for
I think
crazy
a player to watch. Look, before you say what you're going to say, I want to ask you a question.
Okay. Sure.
Don't look. Where would you say that he is in the Disc Golf Pro Tour standings right now?
I have not looked. I did not see this. I would probably say 20th, 19th, 12th. Okay. That's not bad.
I'm saying the guy is playing really well. Anyway, ask me your question.
Well, yeah. So here's after his putting. So Circle 2 putting is his best stat. His next best stat is his birdie percentage. Okay. Where do you think he ranks on tour in birdie percentage?
30th.
15th.
Wow.
The guy isn't inside top 20 in any other stat except Circle 2 putting, yet he still manages to pull off 15th in birdie percentage. I think that just shows he has the ability to get the birdies. The problem is he follows up a birdie with a bogey right after. Sure. And look at his round 2. Round 2, he shot a 7 under and did it with 3 bogeys, I think. 4 bogeys? Hold on, I'm pulling it up.
Yeah, really, what kept him from winning this weekend was the second round, just not quite playing well enough.
Yeah. So he had 3 bogeys, despite a 7 under, despite the 3 bogeys. Tons of birdies.
Impressive. Because Garrett had 11 birdies and no bogeys, and so Corey had 10 birdies and just a couple too many mistakes. Yep. One of which was totally unearned and unfair, and we'll discuss that in our upcoming segment, Rules Rundown, because we need to talk about it. All right, before we do that, I want to talk about Valerie Mandujano and FPO. Katrina Allen comes into the final round with a lead. It's looking like it's going to be hers for the taking. She and Valerie Mandujano match pars for the start of the round, and then Mandujano gets back-to-back birdies. Katrina Allen takes a double bogey and then a bogey, and that was it. I mean, that was basically it. It was over for Katrina Allen after hole 7. She never recovered, and Mandujano able to continue to add some extra birdies along the way. Never bogeys in the final round. Hits one of her 2 circle 2 putts, only misses once from inside the circle, goes like 11 for 12. And continues to show off what we have seen from her every time she's won events this season. This is now her 3rd win, first Silver Series, second or 3rd overall after the 2 Elite Series wins. I mean, the well-roundedness of Val's game continues to be apparent, and she is playing some of the best disc golf in the division right now. And yes, it was a diminished field, and yes, Kristen is over in Europe. We know this. But Mandujano has very clearly established herself as number 4, as we talked about last week, and this only confirms that.
Val is not going to give away strokes to you if you are not going. And here's the thing: imagine a world where Katrina just pars or birdies 6. It's a weird hole, but it is, especially on the FPO side, not. I mean, Val birdied it. It's you're capable of doing it. It's an impressive birdie. I think she was one of 3-4 people that entire day on Sunday to birdie it. So it's not an easy birdie by any means. But Katrina Allen, in a world where she doesn't give away those 3 strokes and have the 5-stroke swing in 3 holes, could have played the exact same rest of the round and won the tournament. Val is not the one who's going to run you down 6 strokes back, but she's also not the one, if you're 3 strokes back, who's going to give the tournament back to you. And Katrina did not do enough to take it from her. You're going to have to really put your foot on the gas. And Valerie Mandujano, I think, I want to go back and look at how many times she's had a lead this year, because Val seems like one of those players that when she has a lead probably has one of the higher odds of winning.
It's a wrap.
Yeah.
It's a wrap. Yeah. I can't remember a tournament where she had a lead and then didn't win this season. Now I remember it from last season because Throw Pink, she had a lead and she didn't win. And I think she learned from that tournament.
Yeah, I think so too. And I mean, the way she didn't win that though was so brutal because hole 17 just ruined her round. But let's be real. Hole 17 will take strokes from anybody, right? That's it. At any other course, I don't know if we have. It
does not discriminate.
That's right. Well-roundedness aside, it will still throw your discs.
We don't care who you are. We don't care how many world championships and USDGC titles you have. We're coming for you.
I love it. It's such a good hole. It was and what I think really impresses me, 100% scramble rate, despite having, in that final round. Sorry, I should clarify. 100% scramble rate, despite getting at least one, having one OB stroke in that final round. She was 92% C1X, 50% Circle 2. I'm one of 2, so not a ton, but it was just, she's just it has such a complete game. It's exceptional how just everything she can do is so, it's so clean. It's so reliable. It's so consistent. And what's insane to me is just how young she is. That is, I think, a feature of players who have been around tour for a long time. We talked about, Garrett Gurthie, for example, who's known for his distance, but when you look, has a pretty well-rounded game as well and is consistent and accurate. But man, Valerie just is on a whole nother level of consistency. And in the FPO field, I think it is, who else is, your consistent, super consistent players? Missy. Right? That's something Missy's known for. But your top players are not known for their consistent excellence. Kristen is. Yeah,
okay. At least you put Kristen in the list. Paige sure is a little more up and down. I think Katrina is pretty consistent. It depends on what you're defining as consistency.
That's true.
If you're consistently finishing 6th, is that different than being consistent if you finish 1st half the time and then 10th half the time? I don't know. Well, we could argue about that.
Sure.
I'll give you that Mandujano has looked very clean, right? The disc throw, the releases are clean. The decision making is clean. The mental game is so strong. I think that's one of the things that I find most impressive. She's talked about it in the interviews after rounds lately. Just focusing on what she can do to try to make her best shots, not try to get too focused on the competition with the player on the course. And she did that again this weekend, where she's able to focus on that. Now, you said she only had 100% scramble in the final round. Not so. She did it for the whole tournament. She went 9 for 9.
Wow.
9 for 9 on scrambles. And, I think she had a couple of bogeys here and there, but none in the final round. And yeah, there's been a good discussion in the Ultiworld Disc Golf Discord for subscribers. We hope you become a subscriber. You know what to do. discgolf.ultiworld.com/subscribe. It's less than $4 a month. And talking about, kind of how we've been discussing Mandujano and whether or not she should be considered a player that has a higher ceiling than some of the other younger players who we're talking about, like Ella Hansen, who have showed, some really top level ability, but also definitely have not played as well as Mandujano. If we're projecting 5 years into the future, are we wrong, Josh, to talk about Ella Hansen as being a player who can really exceed all the current level of play to get to that top tier? Or is it in fact the case that Valerie Mandujano is showing us that she is actually the player who's most likely to be the next superstar, if she's not already, because of what we've seen from her so far this season?
I saw those messages, or that discussion in the Discord, and I've been thinking a lot about that one because it's tricky. So there was an email, and I don't have it off the top of my head who wrote it. Shout out to whoever wrote this email. Thank you for writing in. Talked about how Valerie kind of did the progression that you would expect from a natural sports progression, right? Juniors, advanced, open, now professional, right? Like, and elite series, you could say. She's been at the top of each of those levels and built her way up to this level. It's really difficult to know, and I think the reason I have such a hard time evaluating Valerie is that, when you have players come out of college into the NFL, for example, you can see players and you'll see really good rookies, and you'll say, oh wow, this is a really good rookie, but no one would ever say about that rookie, oh well, this is their ceiling, right? Or the sophomore, right? No one said about Joe Burrow after the Super Bowl, well, man, he's great, he's got a great game, but like this is it for him. We've
seen the best of him. That's it.
That's it. that's it. It's weird because we have a lot of data on Valerie and seen her progression as we would in the natural sports world. And so it makes it weird for me because you're talking, it's really hard to compare someone like Valerie to Ella Hansen, to Kat Murch, to Haley King, who we've seen flashes of brilliance, but also haven't seen the same longevity, I guess, out of the sport. I don't know about Haley King. I'd have to go back and look. That makes it really difficult, I think, to predict. And does more data make it easier to predict Ella Hansen, Valerie Mandujano, who is relatively new on tour and has not been playing at the top level for as long? I think that Val is going to be competitive for a long time, but I think FPO is already seeing what is an exaggerated effect in MPO. Gannon Burr is 16 years old and is competing for Elite Series wins. Valerie is young, but we're going to have 16-year-old FPO players show up in the next 5 years. We're going to have 18-year-old FPO players who we've never even heard of, who are going to show up with a complete, well-rounded game, just like Valerie, that's just, the next level. And I don't think Valerie is in a league of her own to establish herself as being, the top trajectory player in 5 years.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of it comes down to how much you're totally right? Projecting future growth is hard. Like
It is.
if people could do it, we would see teams never make bust picks in professional sports, but they
Right.
make bust picks all the time because you just don't know necessarily how somebody's college performance is going to translate into the professional game. You know, once in a while you get a player who's just so obviously a lock that, you know, a LeBron James type, an Anthony Davis type, that happens. You know, who is that in disc golf? I mean, it was Macbeth, right? Like, you know, you knew.
Yeah.
But with someone like Ella Hansen, you see the raw tools, you see the ultra extreme levels of power that are hard to just generate, replicate. The question that was being discussed in the Discord, is it easier to gain distance or is it easier to gain control and touch? I don't know. You know, and if we want to compare Hansen to Mandujano, I think you have to keep in mind, Mandujano's been playing, what, 6, 7, 8 years?
Competitively,
been playing 2.5 years.
Yeah.
How do we know? We don't know, right? That's the simple story. I still feel that having elite power allows you to then develop the other elements of your game and be very competitive. And I still believe that, like, given that Ella Hansen is still improving regularly, that she has one of the highest ceilings that we have seen for an FPO player. Now, will she develop the control and the putting? Not everyone does. I mean, look at Garrett Gurthie. He's a good example. I would say he has pretty good control, but obviously the putting has been a major weakness, and it's kept him from being in the elite tier. He's a tier 2 player, very solidly, but he's not a tier 1 player. And it's fun to see him playing at that level right now, but, you know, can he find consistency at that level? That's something that we have not seen from him historically. So it's an interesting conversation to have. Like, what defines great tools for a player? What do you need to see from them at age 16 or whatever, whenever they start playing, that lets you say, okay, this is going to be a future superstar? Like Gannon Burr, I feel like I'm seeing those things: power, control, great putter. And, you know, now starting to show the consistency at a young age, similar to the Mandujano, that you want to see. So anyway, I think what more? If you look at 2021 Val stats and you look at 2022 Val stats, she's up across the board.
Yep.
Why can't she make that same leap again in 2023?
You know, and I think that's a very compelling argument. Here's the one thing I want to address in the Discord, though. That's, I think someone said something like, you know, distance is everything, and that is true. But I think it's a really finicky thing to discuss on the FPO side for two reasons. Number one is that courses are still not built properly for FPO, and we've talked about, you know, Paige and her proportionate advantage on courses that are not well designed for FPO, where they just kind of, you know, have them play the same layout as MPO on certain holes and then slap a couple tee pads in a little bit shorter, and, you know, her distance clearly demarcates her from the rest of the field. The second thing, though, that's important is that we have not, I don't think, experienced course design for FPO often around what tomorrow's game is going to look like. And, you know, you could argue that if tomorrow's game is longer, then it's just, you know, today's courses, it's already with the long distances. That might be true. But at OTB, for example, you know, they said that it was designed for FPO in 3 years, and that it's a little bit longer distance, and that's probably going to be more, appropriate for the FPO field. What that tells me is that people are already thinking about, well, how do we make courses for FPO that are designed correctly for FPO game, but still challenge distance, right? The course designers who are charged with designing new courses for the FPO Pro Tour are already thinking about how they're adding distances and just making appropriate fairways and landing zones for FPO. And like MPO, we are going to continue to push where the distance threshold should be on tour until we reach a point where we've gone too far and we have to backpedal. I don't think we're there yet for MPO. I don't think we're there yet for FPO. And it means that courses are just going to get longer. And if Valerie cannot develop the distance to keep up with that, I'm not saying she can't, but if she doesn't, I think you could see her slip behind into a consistent 5th or 6th place finisher.
I will say this. If I had to just answer the question, what's easier to develop, distance or control? I think it's an easy answer. I think it's harder to develop distance. You naturally have an ability to throw an object, and yeah, you can work on your mechanics and you can do whatever, this and that, but there's a reason that not everybody can throw a 95 mile per hour fastball, folks. There's a lot of genetics involved in that, and it's the same reason that you have some players on tour who can throw it 650, 700 feet, and other guys who can't.
Yeah.
Of course they want to. What do you think? They're not out there practicing, try to throw it further? Yeah, and they can add 25, 50 feet. It's the same as if you go to the gym. Do I want to be able to be a power lifter who can do a 1,500 pound total? Sure I do. I'm not going to do that. Genetically, I'm not capable. That's okay.
Yeah.
Like, I can still do well. I can still throw pretty far in disc golf, but I'm never going to be a 1025 rated player. I don't have the ability. Mm-hmm. I can't throw it far enough. Some people have it, some people don't. Control, practice. I can learn to control the disc with muscle memory and repetition. Why do people get better at putting? Because they practice. And yeah, maybe some people have a little bit better hand-eye coordination and are going to be able to be higher up the board, but like Joel Freeman switched his putting. He's up 5% into now probably like the middle of the pack, mid-80s C1X percentage. Trust me, it's easier to get better at putting than to add 100 feet to your drive. It just is. So with that, we're going to take a break. Let us know your thoughts, upshot@ultiworld.com. We always want to hear from you. When we come back, we're going to talk a little rules rundown. Don't go anywhere. The Upshot is presented by Pound Disc Golf, makers of the best bags in the sport. Right now, you can pre-order the 2022 Ambassador Deluxe Octothorpe. Whether you prefer the steel and turquoise colored Nate Sexton version or Big Germ's Ranger Green dipped in black with Bordeaux accents, both just absolutely beautiful bags. The limited edition Ambassador Octothorpes include a special Ambassador patch, as well as all of the upgrades, including Velcro patches, a scorecard pocket, and wider long pockets. Go to PoundDiscGolf.com and pre-order yours today. Welcome back to the Upshot. Our over-under last week was 8.5, over-under a player finishing in the top, 8.5 from Oregon, from the state of Oregon, and
or Washington.
Or Washington, Pacific Northwest. That's right.
Yeah.
Oregon or Washington. Cole Radalin coming through for me. Thank you, young man, for having an incredible final round and getting me the dub. I took the under, and Radalin ended up finishing in 4th place, tied for 4th. 11 under final round, bogey free.
Guy jumped 25 places. I went into that final round. I'm like, I think we're doing okay. Like, Alex Russell's close, but I think he was in it, but I was feeling confident.
I called Cole and I told him,
"You did? Oh, you did,
young man. I need you to step up for me." No, I did not call a player during the middle of a round. I don't do that.
You didn't do that while you were commentating, Charlie?
I didn't.
Did you call his caddy? You called his caddy.
No,
that's what it was.
No, I didn't call his caddy. I called his card mate's caddy. What do you think this is? Amateur hour? All right. So quickly, over at Oulu in Europe, Nicholas Antila beat Lauri Lettinen by 2 strokes. And Heidi Lane wins by 8 strokes in FPO. No Evelina, Henna, or Kristen in the field in FPO. So the top players proven to be the top players over in Europe still. There's not really a lot of questions about it. It's just the field's a little deeper over here in the U.S. And so I thought Linus Karlsson played quite well this weekend. We didn't really talk about him too much. He ended up finishing tied for 6th. A little bit of an up and down round for Karlsson, but some beautiful step putts from Circle 2. So nice to see him hit some of those. Speaking of step putts, I want to talk about something that we just saw this past weekend in our rules rundown segment. We've got 2 controversies to discuss today in a rules rundown. Josh, let's start with this one. The U.S. Amateur Championships took place this weekend. Congratulations to Ilken Groh, who beat Paul Kranz in a 7-hole playoff. So, very awesome. Here's the thing about this. Ilken Groh is only rated 966.
Wow. That's incredible.
Paul Kranz is rated 991. So, like, Ilken just stepped up at the biggest moment to win the U.S. Amateur Championships. Congratulations. Now he's under the microscope a little bit, and I don't necessarily know how much it's his fault versus how much this is about the rules. But take a look, if you're watching on YouTube, at the step putt that he threw to ultimately get... was this to force the playoff?
This is to force the playoff.
This is to force the playoff. So take a look at this step putt. Now, if you slow it down, you can see that not only does his front foot land before he's released the disc, but his back foot that's, behind his marker is fully off of the ground. So this is obviously a foot fault. I don't think it's especially an example of a super close one. And, in real time, it's maybe a little harder to see, but he foot faults here. Josh, people are going crazy about this online. What do you make of this situation, given that, this was to force the playoff, and then he had another step putt to win in the playoff that was similarly clearly a foot fault?
A couple of thoughts. The first one is that we've heard pro players as well as just the general internet forums have all advocated for increasing Circle 1's distance, whether that be to just Circle 1 becoming all of Circle 1 and Circle 2. I think Big Germ on the Jomez practice round advocated a 45-foot Circle 1 ring so that the standstill putters from shorter Circle 2 distance are rewarded, the 40-foot range, for example. I think both of those bring up, and our attempts at solutions, is to trying to find a way to combat step putts like this, that if you are on edge of circle, and I don't know how far exactly this putt was, but when you're on edge of circle, that you're not being able to step putt effectively 6 feet closer and make it a 27-footer. And the fact that you're 33 feet and 33 and a half feet instead of 32 and a half feet means that the distance of, a big 6-foot step. I think you're going to get renewed calls for that and for revamping of what putting looks like in the disc golf, in professional disc golf and amateur disc golf, all around. They're just an updated rules book about what putting looks like, and especially in regards to circles and step putting. Second thought, though, and this is a problem. Let's say you do move it to 66 feet. Are you telling me this guy's not going to step putt at 66 and a half feet just like he did? Right? Or are we not going to have egregious foot faults? If anything, because players feel the need to generate more power at that range, don't you probably have more cases of foot faults if they're putting at 66 feet? I think the argument is that maybe they're throwing, most players would just do a soft little toss or bid at at certain distances, whatever. But the problem, though, is inherent with the way that we have decided to enforce rules in disc golf. And the biggest problem, this is amateurs. This is the amateur championship. We can't even get rules marshals on the professional tour. How do you think you're going to, get that on the amateur championship? It's not going to happen.
I will note there was a marshal there, but they don't call foot faults, Josh.
No, they don't. His opponent is not thinking on hole 18, watching him go to putt for force the playoff. I need to stare and make sure this guy doesn't foot fault. And even if he is, the other two card mates certainly are not. because they're watching to see if he makes the putt, and naturally so. It's only with that video replay when looking back that you're able to see, wow, that's actually pretty egregious. And if you would happen to be focusing on him during that putt, would you be able to see that? And it means that we have a real problem about rules enforcement and how we're going to do so moving forward with cases, of step putting like this, regardless of the distance.
In the current rule environment, the onus is on the opponents on the card to call this foot fault. Does it feel petty? Does it feel wrong? Do you feel guilty about calling it? If this is widespread of enough of an issue, we've just got to change the way that the rule environment works. I don't want to see people blaming Ilkin for step putting illegally. It's bang, bang most of the time, even for the pros. When that disc comes out, I mean, he probably, if you asked him, did you legally step putt there? He probably says yes every time. It's hard to know when your foot hits the ground. So the thing is, if you're the opponent and you're in a big spot like this, you just have to call it. Now, I don't actually think this is how this should work. I think that the cleanest solution to this particular issue, where foot faults are the most prominent and the thing that we need to deal with the most, is in these step putt situations. And it's not even really the jump putts most of the time. It's the step putts. Most people with the jump putt actually get it out of their hand before they hit the ground. I think you just move it all the way back outside circle 2. Like, you can't step putt inside circle 2 anymore. Like, if somebody illegally step putts from 75 feet, I don't know that it's really that big of an issue. And like you could even keep the same rules at that point, but you just say, you know what, no more. Oh, my disc is like a quarter inch behind the circle 1 line, so I'm going to set my marker and throw it from circle 2 so I can step putt. No more. I think that's the cleanest thing. I've seen other people suggest, well, you could have players, you have to have your stepping foot finish behind your marker. So like you could essentially step putt into, the legal position from behind your marker. But I don't know, that feels like then if somebody quote unquote legally step putts where that foot doesn't land, then aren't they foot faulting because they don't have a foot behind the disc, within the 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper size box?
It creates problems on drives as well, like fairway shots.
Right, and that's the other thing. You
can't fall forward.
How do you apply this rule in the fairways if you're not applying? Like, that's why I think it's cleanest to just say you have to maintain balance inside of circle 2.
There you go.
And I think it's a good evolution of the game anyway. The top pros are getting so good from circle 2, giving them this extra advantage of having these sort of like gray area step putts isn't good anymore. Like, let me see you knock it in with clean balance from 60 feet. It looks cooler anyway. So that's my thoughts. Sure, I'd love to have marshals making these calls, but in real time, it's hard to tell whether something's legal or illegal. Let's remove the gray area here.
And here's the hardest part is that nobody, I guarantee that Ilkin has step putted illegally at least half a dozen times in that tournament.
Right. We haven't have the video, but I think it's safe to say. We don't have the video.
Yeah. So the problem is much like the cameras, the competitors aren't watching with the same scrutiny during the rest of the round. I mean, when someone's circle 2 putting, you're probably watching, but you're also looking at your lie. You're looking at where you're going to be putting from. You're wiping your disc off. You're, choosing which disc you're going to use. Whatever it is. You're looking at putting scores in. You're checking scores. It's not until those real pressure holes that you're really going to start paying attention. And in that final round, that you're going to really start paying attention closely. And at that point, it's like, there's a fair argument. I don't know if it's a fair argument. It would
it's an
suck.
argument.
It's an argument, though, if you're Ilkin and you make this putt and then you get called on a foot fault and you say, done it all weekend, why didn't anybody call me on it starting in round one? Right.
Right. Only calling it because it's a big spot and I made the putt.
And then it looks petty. It looks petty. And it isn't. It is. It isn't. I don't know. It's a mess right now.
I'm saying.
I know. I agree. I think I see the rationale though about why the impact of the step putt becomes less significant outside of 66 feet, because it's noteworthy. In circle 2 right now, it is the fairway. We only use circle 2 as a statistics tracker. It does not have any meaningful impact on the game.
Good point.
So if you're going to, whether you want to keep circle 1 and circle 2 the same, but just say no step putting inside of either circles, that's fine, right? That
expand lots circle of ways. 1. There's a lot of options here.
Yeah,
but
a lot of options to do it.
Pretty much all of the options include removing step putting past your disc within a certain proximity of the basket as part of the solution.
Yep.
So I hope we see changes here, because this is not to pick on Ilkin. I mean, look, the guy played amazing, played way above his rating, and persevered in a 7-hole playoff. And if you really think that he won unfairly because his foot may have landed on the ground on his step putt, I mean, come on, that's a stretch. They hug it out afterwards. Like his competitor's not calling him on the questionable step putt. So This is not to pick on him. It just happens to be the latest example of this, and I think it needs to get dealt with. Okay, so now on to an even crazier controversy. Corey Ellis, round 2, hole 15. Throws a putt into the chains from, 15, 20 feet, settles into the basket, and falls out the bottom of the basket. They didn't come out the side. It didn't pop out. It didn't get spit out. It landed in the basket, and then it fell out of the bottom of the basket. And he took the stroke because the disc didn't come to rest supported by the basket, because there was a disc-sized hole in the bottom of the basket. Josh, what should have been the outcome here? Was obviously the basket was flawed. I don't think we need to go into that. The basket is not supposed to let your disc fall out the bottom. This is obvious. What should happen now, and what should have happened during the round in your mind?
During the round, my understanding is he played it correctly. I mean, like you said, that I think that is the correct procedure, because then there is, if you cannot reinterpret that rule without causing real problems, right? About if where the disc and how it comes in or out, or if someone aces and it breaks the disc and the disc comes out. I mean, it's clear in the rules that wouldn't be an ace. I think that there is a danger, and this kind of applies to what we were talking to about, no step putting, during circle 2, or, falling in front of your disc at all. That applies to the fairways as much as it applies to circle 2 putting. The same thing goes here, where if you start to reinterpret rules mid-round, you have to think about all the possible scenarios.
Yeah, the implications.
And the implications that come with that. I'm sure you could find a proper wording for it and make it okay. But to be frank, I mean, my understanding is that he played that properly by taking that extra stroke. Pro Tour's got to do something, though. And maybe they've talked about standardizing baskets and coming out with a standardized basket. I don't know if the solution means that any disc golf. I think the first solution is that any tournament that wants to be Disc Golf Pro Tour affiliated, whether that be Silver Series, whether that be Match Play, whether that be an Elite Series, has to have maybe it's just the problem. I mean, this is probably a PDGA approved basket, except for the wear and tear on it. That's what I would have to imagine is the case. I don't think that's a manufacturer defect. I'm sure it's just that someone pulled on that basket once, or some random part.
I mean, it's obviously a super old basket. I believe what I've heard is that they welded a metal kind of like bottom crossbar into place after the old one, I don't know, rusted out or broke off or whatever. And clearly they didn't do it quite right. But like, should we have baskets on tour that are like, you know, like zombie baskets, like with Frankensteining parts into them? I mean, I think the answer is obviously no.
You know, there are PDGA approved baskets that are not fit for the Pro Tour. I think the Pro Tour should have a list of baskets that they say are acceptable baskets for tour that have to demonstrate.
But this exists.
Have been checked.
I mean, this exists. Yes. There's PDGA championship approved level baskets, and the Disc Golf Pro Tour establishes their own list.
I didn't know the Pro Tour had their own list.
To be honest, I don't know exactly what like brand of basket was at the Beaver State Fling. The problem was not the basket; it's that it's old. And I actually have to say I disagree with you.
Okay,
I've thought about this a bunch over the last 48 hours, and I think that the correct resolution should have been, this was an equipment failure. There's never, ever supposed to be a basket that lets a disc fall out of the bottom. We have clear visual evidence. Other people on the card saw it happen. And the resolution should have been that that stroke was removed. Like,
is that how
why
the rules
in the
read?
world? Well, no. I mean, who would put in a thing where, like, if the basket randomly failed? Because, like, you could argue, oh, the chains failed me because they spit out my putt. But, like, the actual tray is never, ever, ever supposed to let a disc fall out of the basket. Like, to me, it's a common sense ruling to say this stroke shouldn't count. And you can argue that there's like some kind of slippery slope going on there. I get the point. I understand that these things can get extremely technical, and maybe somebody could say, well, the weld of this chain mechanism was not quite right. So when my disc hit it, it spit it out to the left when it should have caught it. Mm-hmm. I mean, I can, in a lawyerly mind, I can think about that as some kind of argument somebody might try to make. Joel Freeman. The question is, in this situation, like, anybody who looks at this is going to say the same thing. Well, he shouldn't have to take that stroke. And that's what I think that the TD and the Pro Tour should have done. They should have said, you shouldn't have to take that stroke. This basket was not checked. It was improper. It should never have let a disc trickle out the way that it did. And I don't know, like, by the actual like hardcore rule book interpretation, sure, he has to take the stroke. But I think it sucks. He would have been tied with Garrett Gurthie going into the final round if he doesn't take that extra bogey. And who knows how that would have affected everything else in the round. It's not just that he would have been tied, it's that he would have been a stroke closer the whole time. Maybe he makes different decisions along the way. It's like butterfly effect. Mm-hmm. I mean, obviously fixing the basket should be a priority for the future. Maybe there should be some rule on like how old the baskets are allowed to be at your course. I get it's a Silver Series, but this is the Beaver State Fling. This is a historic tournament. You can't have the disc fall out of the bottom of the basket. I'm not asking for a lot, folks. I'm not asking for a lot. I don't even, you got a basket that spits out a lot. Oh, woe is you. Whatever. Learn to putt better. If you want to standardize the baskets, fine. But they can't let the disc fall out of the bottom of the basket. This is what I ask. I've literally never seen this in the history of disc golf. Never seen it.
I think the best and cleanest way to handle it, and I know it's probably not perfect, but I think it's the easiest way. I don't know. Maybe. How does the Pro Tour transport all their camera equipment?
I think they have a trailer of some kind.
Okay, that's what I imagined. You get the Pro Tour that says, this is our basket, and they carry around 18 of them in their trailer, right? They get them special made that, even though they're permanent baskets, still are able to be taken apart, that fold up, and they have a nice like case, and they make a container that holds 18 or 36 cases, and the Pro Tour carries around their baskets, and they show up and they set up the baskets on course. it means that they can change the green a little bit, right? You pull out the normal basket, move it around a little bit according to how you want it for the Pro Tour, and then you're guaranteed that you always have integrity. I've thought a lot about that. I think it's a logistical nightmare, but I would love to see that. I think that'd be...
But I mean, that's calling for straight, complete conformity, right? Pure basket standardization, not even to the extent of having the same model at different courses, but literally the same baskets at every course. Yeah, like they could do it if they wanted to. It would be a pain in the ass. It would be expensive, and it could be difficult because some baskets are, you know, permanently installed in the ground in concrete. You know, I don't necessarily think that's the direction they need to go, but there needs to be more clarity around exactly what's allowed. Like these baskets, this age, and they're all hand checked every round or whatever. I mean, Corey Ellis before the start of the final round was like, "Have you checked the baskets?" Like I would ask the same thing if I was Corey. I mean, come on, man. That's the craziest thing ever. He didn't even see it. He sees the puck go in to the chains and fall in the basket. He looks down to pick up his mini, and he looks back up and his putter's on the ground, and he's like, "What?"
Well, as he stands up, he like even waves to the crowd. He has no clue that it's fallen out. Poor guy.
Oh, that is too much, man. One of the great things about golf, though, is that these crazy things happen and we get to talk about
it. Yes, it does. Logistical and rules nightmare. That's all I got to say.
All right, Josh, you have a special shout out to give. What is it?
I do. I saw this on Facebook last Thursday, so this total has changed a little bit. But as of last Thursday, June 9th, the Wisconsin Disc Golf Hall of Fame has created a poster. It's I don't even know what to call it exactly. It's a counter, basically, for a man named Michael Wright, who has played at least one round of disc golf, defined as 18 holes, for 3,171 consecutive days.
Wow. So that's coming up. That's like
coming up on 10 years.
Coming up on 10 years.
9.5. Yeah.
Wow.
No, I think it's just over almost 9 years, actually, right?
Almost 9 years. Yeah.
Yeah, almost 9 years. So every day, 18 holes for almost 9 years. He now has a plaque with a counter that they update in the Wisconsin Hall of Fame, Disc Golf Hall of Fame. So
I'll tell you what. I don't know if you deserve a counter for that stat if you live in South Florida, but if you live in Wisconsin, oh, you deserve it. You deserve it. I can't even imagine some of those rounds. What? I mean, that's an incredible statistic, man. I don't know how that's possible. Like, did you ever have a day where you your car broke down or, you broke your leg or like,
you have COVID.
There's so many things that could derail this plan. It's Christmas.
The guy shows up in like full PPE. He's got like N95, like full mask, visor. He's like got a sign on his back that says "Stay 6 feet away." Stay 15 feet away from me. I have COVID. He's out there throwing his discs, just burning up.
Michael Wright was his name.
Michael Wright. Yep.
Michael Wright. Well, if you hear this, Michael, give us a shout. Upshot at ultiworld.com. Also, I bet there's going to be some listener out there who's like, well, I played 5,000 days in a row, so let me know who has played the most. There's got to be Guinness World Record on this.
Oh yeah, this guy should apply for it. But
yeah, incredible. Yeah. All right, well, that is going to do it for today's show. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll be back with you on Thursday with our match play preview. Looking forward to the weekend in Colorado. For Josh Mansfield, I'm Charlie Eisenhood saying so long, and we'll talk to you on Thursday.